We keep ending up with the worst leaders. Every time we vote for people who promise to fix things only to watch them make everything worse, we hope for change, but all we get is another round of manipulation. And here's the thing, it's not just bad luck. There's a reason this keeps happening. It's wired into human nature, built into the way our minds work. Why does power so often end up in the wrong hands? It's a question philosophers have wrestled with for centuries. Plato believed democracy was doomed to lead to tyranny because people are just too easy to deceive. He compared society to a ship, not one steered by the most skilled sailors, but by those who simply know how to talk their way into control. We don't pick leaders based on wisdom or integrity. We choose the ones who are best at playing on our fears and desires, and that, according to Plato, is the fundamental flaw of democracy. It's driven by emotion, not reason. Gustave Le Bon, in his work on crowd psychology, made an interesting observation. People don't think the same way in a group as they do on their own. Something changes, their mindset shifts. But when Le Bon talks about a crowd, he doesn't just mean a bunch of people standing together at a protest or a rally. He's talking about a state of mind, a psychological effect that can take hold even when people are miles apart. In Le Bon's view, a crowd isn't just a bunch of people gathered in one place. It's a collective, united by shared emotions and ideas. It could be fear, hope, anger, or excitement. What matters isn't where they are, but what's happening in their minds. The moment someone gets caught up in the crowd's energy, independent thinking starts to fade, and they begin following the group's mood instead. And this doesn't just happen at protests or rallies. It plays out during political campaigns, across social media, in religious movements, even in financial crises, when panic spreads like wildfire, and people start making the same irrational decisions. In a crowd, critical thinking takes a back seat. People become more emotional, more suggestible. They don't stop to analyze information, they just react, going along with whatever everyone else is feeling. Le Bon argued that when people get caught up in a crowd, they end up doing things they'd never even consider on their own. Emotions take over. Fear spreads easily. A few powerful words can inspire or manipulate an entire group. Individual doubts fade, and suddenly people start making decisions together, choices that feel right in the moment but lead to disaster down the road. And that's exactly why the most charismatic, attention-grabbing leaders, the ones who know how to put on a show but have little substance, keep rising to the top. They don't need to be wise or honest. They just need to know how to stir emotions and play the crowd. In The Prince, Machiavelli didn't just outline strategies for ruling. He made a harsh but simple point. Power and honesty don't always go hand in hand. To stay in control, a leader needs to know how to lie, manipulate, and take down their rivals without hesitation. A ruler who's too honest? Easy target. Too kind? They'll be used and discarded. Power isn't about virtue, it's about survival. And that's why the ones who rise to the top aren't always the best leaders. More often, they're just the most ruthless. No one likes being lied to, but as Jean-Jacques Rousseau pointed out, people don't really want the truth. They want to hear what they already believe. That's why politicians who promise simple fixes to complex problems will always be more popular than the ones who tell it like it is. A leader who warns about tough choices. They don't stand a chance against the one who just says, "Everything will be fine." Because when it comes down to it, people don't choose the most capable leaders. They choose the ones who make them feel hopeful. Italian philosopher and politician Antonio Gramsci argued that power isn't just about force, it's about controlling the way people think. Leaders shape public opinion so that decisions seem natural, inevitable, unquestionable. Propaganda doesn't just push a message, It creates the feeling that there's no real choice, that certain politicians are the only option. And that's how the same incompetent leaders keep getting re-elected, even when their past decisions have led to disaster. Thomas Hobbes believed that people don't choose bad leaders because they like them. They choose them because they're afraid. The fear of chaos is stronger than the fear of corruption, repression, or injustice. People will put up with almost anything if it means avoiding total disorder. In his view, the state exists to keep human aggression in check. And when society faces a crisis, whether it's economic collapse, war, or social unrest, people are willing to follow anyone who promises to protect them. Hannah Arendt, in her studies on totalitarianism, pointed out that in times like these, people are especially vulnerable to propaganda. They'll believe even the most far-fetched theories if it makes them feel safer, if it gives them a sense of control. The worst leaders don't rise to power in times of stability. They take over when fear clouds judgment. They create an enemy, real or imagined, and promise to save people from it. And even when people suspect they're being lied to, they keep believing, because sometimes a comforting lie feels less terrifying than facing the unknown. Even in ancient times, Aristotle warned that democracy can easily turn into mob rule. When everyone sees themselves as equal, expertise starts to lose its value. Suddenly, experts aren't trusted. They're seen as part of the elite, and that makes them the enemy of the people. So instead of choosing leaders based on competence, society starts picking the ones who simply know how to speak the language of the crowd. Alexis de Tocqueville, in Democracy in America, pointed out something similar. When everyone believes they're equal, it's easy to assume that anyone can be a leader. And if leadership is open to all, then even the least prepared can end up in charge. Democracy creates the illusion that governing isn't a skill or an art. It's just another job that anyone can do. And the more populist a society becomes, the less it values real expertise. Instead, it rewards those who tell people exactly what they want to hear. Nietzsche took this idea even further with his concept of slave morality. He argued that people don't just tolerate weak leaders, they actively choose them. Not because they're the best option, but because strong leaders scare them. A strong leader demands change, challenges the status quo, and forces people out of their comfort zones. A weak leader does the opposite. They offer the illusion of stability, reassuring people that everything can stay just the way it is. And in the end, most people don't want to be led by someone who pushes them forward. They want someone who makes them feel safe, even if that choice leads to decline. We like to think we make rational, well-thought-out choices. But in reality, most of our decisions happen on autopilot, driven by emotions, not logic. Our brains weren't designed to carefully analyze every detail. They evolved to react fast, spot threats, and grab onto the simplest solution. So when we choose leaders, we're not really evaluating their ability to govern. We're picking up on their voice, their expressions, their confidence, their charisma. We tell ourselves we're choosing the smartest person for the job, but more often than not, we're just choosing the one who feels strong and trustworthy. Psychologists call this cognitive bias, mental shortcuts that trick us into making irrational choices. If someone looks good, speaks well, and carries themselves with confidence, we instinctively assume they're capable. At the same time, we tend to notice only the information that supports what we already believe and ignore anything that challenges it. That's why politicians who tell us exactly what we want to hear win our support, even when they're lying. The truth is, our brains are lazy. It's easier to believe a catchy slogan than to wrestle with complex issues. And at the end of the day, we don't choose leaders based on their ability to solve real problems. We choose them the same way we pick products off a shelf, by the packaging. And let's be honest, a charismatic speaker with simple promises will always beat the boring expert with complicated but well-reasoned solutions. No one likes to feel like they've been fooled. Once we've made a choice, admitting we were wrong is hard. That's what's called the sunk cost effect, when we've already invested time, energy, or emotions into supporting a politician. It's easier to defend their mistakes than to face the fact that we were misled. Even when a leader fails completely, their supporters keep standing by them, because accepting the truth can feel worse than the lie. Then there's the group effect. We tend to follow the crowd, not necessarily because we believe something, but because we want to belong. If everyone around us supports a certain leader, we're more likely to do the same, even if we have doubts. This effect becomes even stronger during times of crisis, when fear and uncertainty make people desperate for someone, anyone, who can confidently say, "I've got this." And politicians know exactly how to take advantage of that. They create an enemy, someone to blame for all our problems. Maybe it's another country. Maybe it's the rich. Maybe it's the poor. Maybe it's a specific group of people. The actual target doesn't matter. What matters is the distraction. Because when there's someone to point a finger at, people feel like they understand the problem. They feel safer, even if, in reality, nothing actually changes. The world is complicated, but we don't like complicated. We want things to make sense. We want clear answers, quick fixes. Uncertainty makes us uncomfortable, so we're naturally drawn to leaders who say exactly what we want to hear. "I'll fix everything. I'll restore order. I'll make you rich." These promises feel real, not because they are, but because we need them to be. And the worse things get, the more desperate we are to believe that someone, somewhere, has an easy solution. We don't want to hear that real change takes time, that fixing problems is messy, that it requires tough decisions. We just want someone to tell us, everything's going to be fine. And then there's the first impression effect. Our brains judge people in seconds. If a politician looks confident, sounds reassuring, and seems like they know what they're doing, we instinctively like them. And once we've made up our minds, we start looking for reasons to prove we were right. Even when new facts emerge, facts that completely contradict what we believe, we ignore them. Because admitting we were wrong feels harder than just sticking to the story we've already told ourselves. We like to think we learn from our mistakes, but the truth is we don't. Not really. Our memory doesn't work that way. Over time, the bad parts fade, details get blurry, and we start looking at the past through rose-colored glasses. We remember old leaders as better than they actually were. We idealize some, demonize others, but we rarely stop to ask, what really went wrong? In the system, it doesn't help. Bad leaders don't just disappear. They set the stage for more just like them. They create a system that rewards mediocrity, eliminates real competition, discredits experts, and manipulates the media. So when election time comes around, people don't see real alternatives. And without alternatives, history just keeps repeating itself. First, we have to learn to spot manipulation. Our emotions are the easiest tool for politicians to use against us. The ones who shout the loudest stir up fear and promise quick fixes. They're almost always playing a game. If a leader says, "I alone can fix everything," that's already a red flag. A real leader doesn't avoid tough issues, doesn't divide the world into heroes and villains, and doesn't rely on fear to stay in power. The more emotional the speech, the more likely it's designed to control rather than inform. Second, we need to think critically. The best way to avoid bad choices is to stop and analyze instead of just reacting. Politicians know how to play to our biases, and if we don't question what we hear, we're easy to manipulate. So whenever you find yourself agreeing with a politician, ask yourself, what if I'm wrong? That one question forces you to step back, see the bigger picture, and avoid falling into the same traps over and over again. One of the best things you can do is compare different sources of information. If you only follow news that confirms what you already believe, you end up in an information bubble, and that's exactly what politicians want. They create an environment where people only hear one version of events over and over again. That's why it's worth looking at different perspectives, even the ones you disagree with. It doesn't mean you have to change your mind, but it does mean you'll be making decisions with a clearer picture. And here's another big mistake: putting charisma above competence. Too often we judge leaders by how they speak, rather than what they actually do. And sure, charisma is important. It can inspire, it can motivate, but it doesn't replace real skill. A leader who sounds confident but lacks experience, knowledge, or a solid plan isn't going to guide a country to success. They're going to lead it straight into disaster. Before throwing your support behind a politician, ask yourself, what have they actually done? Do they have real achievements? Can they govern, or do they just look good on camera? Promises don't mean much. Competence is measured by results. And here's something even more important. Understand the basics of economics and politics. You don't need to be an expert, but if you don't know how things work, it's easy to be misled. And politicians take full advantage of that. They promise the impossible, knowing most people won't question whether it's even realistic. At the very least, know the fundamentals. Where does government money actually come from? How are laws made? What powers does a leader have? What decisions belong to Parliament? The more people understand how power works, the harder it is for politicians to manipulate them. Politics is designed to make you emotional. Fear for the future, anger at the opposition, promises of a better life, it's all meant to push you into making decisions without really thinking. So when you feel that emotional pull, take a step back and ask yourself, is this person telling the truth or just playing on my feelings? The smartest way to vote is with your head, not your heart. The best candidate isn't always the most exciting one. They might not be charismatic. They might even seem a little dull. But what matters is whether they can actually do the job. The reason bad leaders keep winning is simple. People vote in the heat of the moment without thinking about what their choices will mean a few years down the line. And if we want better leaders, we need to stop looking for messiahs. A leader isn't a savior, a hero, or a miracle worker. No one person can fix everything. Instead of searching for the perfect leader, we should be looking at the system itself. Because if the system keeps putting the worst people in power, then maybe the real problem isn't just the leaders, it's the way we choose them. If this video made you think, share it with someone who might need to hear this. And if you want to dive deeper into psychology, philosophy, and power, hit like, leave a comment, and subscribe for more. What do you think? Why do we keep choosing the wrong leaders? Let's discuss in the comments. The more we understand, the better choices we can make.